About to be joined, though, by Adam Lucas of GoHeels.com, the co-host of the Carolina Insider podcast, to talk all things North Carolina and what Arkansas is going to see this week in a 3-game series. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Adam Lucas of GoHeels.com, the co-host of the Carolina Insider podcast. Adam, thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
Good. Appreciate you having me, buddy.
I appreciate you taking some time to kind of educate the Razorback Nation here on what they're really going to see out of this team. So let's just kind of start there. What are some of the highlighted pieces that the Tar Heels are going to trot out onto the field on Saturday?
Well, I think traditionally when you think about Carolina being good in baseball, when they went through the run of going to Omaha just about every year, they a lot of times did it with really top-line starting pitching. Andrew Miller and Daniel Bard and Matt Harvey and guys like that. And that's really not the case this year. The Tar Heels have juggled their weekend rotation throughout the season. Some of the guys who were in that weekend rotation at the beginning of the year are not there anymore and, in fact, really aren't pitching very much anymore.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So that's been a bit of a struggle. But the bullpen, when Carolina went through the stretch in the middle of the season when they just lost a ton of ACC games late, the bullpen was not very good. They've since figured it out. Davis Palermo on the back end, and then Gage Gillian last weekend in the regional was really good. So they've got some pieces in some different places that have produced here at the end of the year when the Tar Heels have played a whole lot better than they did in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm. And just watching North Carolina through the regionals and kind of just looking at statistics, going back through box scores, it seems like Scott Foster and his coaching staff, they're not afraid to pull somebody real quick.
Yeah, I think part of the thing is the Tar Heels don't have any star pitching, but they have a lot of above-average pitching. And so I think Scott Forbes and the pitching coach, Brian Gaines, feel pretty comfortable that if one of those guys just doesn't have it that day, then they're okay pulling them and going to somebody else who maybe's got a little better stuff. That was the case with Gillian in the deciding game of the regional. I think he went out there, in fact, we talked to him today, he went out there thinking, maybe an inning or two because he had thrown the previous 3 days. And he just got rolling and ended up giving the Tar Heels 4 1/3. So when you don't have that one superstar guy, I think you turn to whoever's got the hot hand on that day on the mound.
Yeah, and Adam, when it comes to this team and just the season that they've had, I mean, obviously off to a very, very hot start. I think y'all started 17-3 through your first 20. You get the series win against Duke. Feels like everything's rolling. What kind of happened there, mid to late March, where it kind of felt like the wheels were falling off for the Tar Heels?
Yeah, Carolina's got some younger players who took the league by surprise a little bit in the first part of the season. But as you know, same in the SEC, once teams see you on video and they start figuring out where your weaknesses are, they start hammering those weaknesses until you prove you can make the adjustment. Carolina's best offensive player is Vance Honeycutt. He's a true freshman who had a great regional. And he had a great start to the year, but then middle part of the season, he just wasn't having much success. So he worked really hard with Jesse Wersbicki, Carolina's assistant coach who handles the offense, made a couple adjustments to his swing, and this last month or so, he's just been on fire. Several guys had to make similar adjustments to that because they were not producing in the middle of the year. And Carolina's juggled their lineup a little bit. Taking some guys out, put some guys in. Colby Wilkerson's now in at second base and hitting at the bottom of the order just to shore up the defense a little bit, because if you don't have that super potent offense, although these days everybody's got a super potent offense because the ball is juiced beyond belief, if you don't have maybe a superstar offense like Carolina's had before, you got to make sure you're not making errors in the field.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up the very talented freshman Honeycutt and what he's been able to do this year. And obviously, if it wasn't for the phenomenal season just right up down the road at North Carolina State and Tommy White, what he's been able to produce, do you think that he's put up the type of numbers that would normally win you a Freshman of the Year award?
I don't know that he's done it throughout the season, which I think you typically have to do to win that type of award. Certainly Tommy White had a great year, and as you mentioned, he's just right up the road, and then that road kept on going right out of Raleigh as he's in the transfer portal. But I don't think he's been quite as consistent. I did the Carolina baseball games on the radio for 10 years, and the best I saw in that time was Dustin Ackley. I think Dustin Ackley, probably a little better hitter for average in college. I think his worst season batting average was .402, and that's when he was a freshman. That's the worst he ever did. But Honeycutt's got better power, and he's better in the field. His catch against Georgia in the regional last weekend in the ninth inning that saved the game-tying home run, that probably is what propelled Carolina onto the Super Regional. If he doesn't make that play, I think Georgia probably wins that game and eliminates the Tar Heels.
Yeah, and speaking of home runs, both of these teams, they are at or north of 100 home runs to this point through the regional. Talking with some of the coaches and some of the players, does it feel like this is going to be a series that does ultimately come down to whoever hits the most home runs? Because Arkansas has been known to be a team that lives and dies by the long ball.
Yeah, I think probably so, because I think that's what college baseball is this season. I do think they've wound the ball so tight that even you or I could probably hit a home run. And it really shouldn't be that way. Seeing some of the scores we're seeing in regionals last weekend, and that I'm guessing we're probably going to see in supers this coming weekend. So I do think it's going to be an offense-heavy series. I'm not sure Carolina's got the pitching to hold Arkansas to 2 or 3 runs, so I think it'd probably be better for the Tar Heels if it was an offensive series.
We're talking with Adam Lucas from GoHeels.com, the co-host of the Carolina Insider Podcast. Now, Adam, one thing that's been making its trip around social media is obviously head coach Scott Forbes and the ejection from the regionals. For those who have seen the video but haven't done their own research, kind of like tell us about the craziness that it was and kind of what all led up to the explosion there.
Well, first of all, that was not an explosion. That was like a mild disagreement about a judgment call that then some umpires who were on an incredible power trip decided they were going to make themselves the show, that everyone had bought tickets to watch them. Scott Forbes got thrown out from the dugout, which is fine. I mean, the 2 calls he was questioning were judgment calls. I think one of them probably was poor and one of them might have been right. But either way, they were judgment calls. What can you do? That's an umpire's right. So then he gets thrown out. Okay, that happens. But then what I think really ticked people off was he came out to find out why he'd gotten thrown out. And as soon almost as he got out there, the home plate umpire, or first base umpire, decided he was going to suspend him 2 games on the spot for failing to leave the field in a timely manner. It was less than 15 seconds. I mean, any of us who watch baseball have seen something millions of times worse than that. And I think, unfortunately, that was not the only instance in the regionals last weekend around the country that we saw of umpires making themselves feel very important and making themselves the show, which is not what it should be when you get to this point in the season. No,
it definitely shouldn't. A judgment call should never, and just in any sport, an umpire, referee, I don't think should ever be the center of the stage or have that much power in their hands that can control the outcome. Now, one of the big things that have been kind of talked about here since yesterday is the fact of the ticket sales and how much that Tar Heel baseball fans have really gobbled up that they're not going to be selling, any actual tickets outside of what has been allotted to Arkansas fans. Was that a little surprising of kind of how fast they went, or were you this an expecting situation and kind of what you've come to know for North Carolina baseball of just having a fan base that gobbles up tickets that fast?
Well, I think when you get to the point in the season that you're at a super regional level, I do think that's something that expected, especially when the opponent is Arkansas. Carolina hosted a super here a couple years ago, and Stetson was here. That one wasn't quite as hot a ticket, as you might imagine. But you've got Arkansas coming to town, and they're going to take every single one of their 600 tickets. They're a baseball brand name that people know. It's the only sport going on in Chapel Hill right now, of course. It's the only sport going on the college landscape. And Carolina's had a really good athletics year. So I think people are excited about Carolina athletics. They want to squeeze every possible day out of this sports season. And the way to do that is to try to get over to Boshamer Stadium this weekend. I don't think there's going to be, there won't be any sales to the public on the Carolina side either. So it's not just the Arkansas folks who aren't able to get their hands on tickets. Anyone who didn't buy season tickets or is pretty high up in the Rams Club, which is Carolina's booster club, they're not going to get their hands on tickets either. So just kind of a product of the environment. Arkansas gets 600, and the place seats somewhere around 3,000, 3,500. So somewhere around 20% of the folks in there are going to be wearing red.
Mm-hmm. And with Boshamer Stadium, us here in the SEC, we're used to these palaces of college baseball stadiums. Obviously, just to name a few. I mean, Baum Walker, obviously here in Arkansas, Alex Box at LSU, Swayze Field at Ole Miss, Dewey Noble at State. These are huge college baseball stadiums that hold 10,000+. Boshamer's not that big, but what makes that stadium unique?
Well, and just be glad you weren't here about 15 years ago before Chad Flack hit the home run down in Alabama to send Carolina to Omaha for the first time in forever because it was more like 1,500.
Wow.
So you're seeing the improved Boshamer Stadium. Carolina immediately redid the stadium in 2007. I think what makes it unique and what also may make it frustrating for some Arkansas folks this weekend, it's right on campus. It's not in the middle of a bunch of parking lots. Like you'll see at some other ACC schools. It is directly on campus. It is you could hit the football stadium with a football from Boshamer. But what that also means is parking is going to be a challenge, especially at 11 a.m. on a weekday. There's going to be professors and all that stuff, people who work at the hospital parking in their normal daily spots. So if you're an Arkansas fan who's going to the game and you're planning on rolling in about 10:30, that's probably not going to work. You're going to need to get there earlier. You're going to need to find a place to park, maybe walk over to Franklin Street, get you some breakfast, and then come over to the game.
Well, speaking of walking over to Franklin Street, last thing before we let you go, Adam, I've got a few hours in Chapel Hill. What's the one thing that if I was going to go, or any Razorback fans listening right now that are planning a trip to Chapel Hill, what's the one thing they got to do?
You got to walk down Franklin Street. I saw y'all are broadcasting from Sutton's.
We are.
Maybe Friday morning.
Friday and Saturday.
Great call. Yeah, that's a great call. There'll be locals there who eat there pretty much every morning, and then you're right there in the heart of town. Top of the hill, maybe after the game on Friday and Saturday, since the games are early, you'll have a nice view of Franklin Street. You'll get good food, maybe a little something to drink. And then while you're here, I think you got to swing by the Carolina Basketball Museum. Ton of stuff there. If nothing else, you've got to see Mike Krzyzewski's letter to Michael Jordan saying that he's sorry that Michael Jordan chose to attend Carolina, wishing him best of luck in college basketball, which it turned out did work out pretty well.
Yeah, it turned out pretty good for that guy named Michael, didn't it? Well, Adam, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Enjoy the baseball this week, and if Arkansas and North Carolina's paths ever cross again, we'll have to have you back on.
Drew, as hot as the Hogs are in basketball, I got a feeling we're going to see in basketball.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, fights, and even next season's futures. And don't forget that the MLB is back as well. Who are you picking to win the World Series? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.